We brought up in a sharing, learning, cooperative coaching growth environment and really fed off one another. And that doesn't seem to be happening today. It's sort of a drill copy generation and a closed door, keep it in your pocket kind of generation. So, Thomas, if you could keep that learning door open and just ask your questions, we'll see where it goes.
The first thing, Dave, I would love to, if you would be able to elaborate a little bit on what you said the last time. And it absolutely struck me. You said that the Russians deeply understood why they are doing certain things. The players truly understood what it would do to you, to other teams, if they would stretch, if they would use the D-man joining the rush, etc., etc. Would you talk as a coach and teacher how important it is for the players to deeply understand why we are doing things?
Yeah, Thomas, you're right. And, if you look back at the Russians, just one observation I would make would be when they were in summer training, they were on the ice, but they also played a lot of soccer and they played a lot of basketball. And so a lot of those tactics in those two sports are very applicable to understanding hockey, and is really clear. So that made the Russians, I think, always clearly understand what they were doing to us, and they did it a lot, and it was difficult to defend. I would say one thing. I've always felt that understanding precedes execution. It's interesting. We often tell young players, what they have to do, how they have to do it, but unless you tell them why they have to do it and they grasp that idea, things are not in context then. So you have to always stress that. And so I've always been, and I learned this from George Kingston, Claire Drake, when they coached. I watched them coach, I watched them present. I always saw how they talked about the why as much as the what and how of doing things on the ice, Thomas. So I think that's really important. I think if you're going to ask players to play a certain way, there has to be some understanding of it. And then there has to be some collectivity to it. Like it's fine to have a strategy, a tactical plan, whatever you want to call it, but everybody's got to buy into it. And, my time with the national team, that was an easy sell. It wasn't difficult. We were in a playing field that was not very even. When we played the Czechs and the Russians, they were just so good and so smart with their game that they gave us a lot of difficulty. And so I learned then that, these teams understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so I always took that approach, national team. And then I took it into the Flames too, as well, when I started my NHL career coaching. But that was a little different. There's always your personnel, the guys you're coaching, sometimes give you thought for doing things a little bit different at certain levels. So, but really, to answer your question, understanding precedes execution, and you have to have that. And that always impressed me about the Czechs and the Russians. And I'm not going to say the Finns weren't good, but I always felt in their heyday, when the Russians were at their very best in the middle 80s to about maybe the early 90s, they were really at their top. And I've talked to Tikhonov, some of those guys when I was over there coaching, and they agree that was a time when they were at their best. And the only team that could play with them and play them nose up was the Czechs. Everybody else, we had to compensate. We had to play much more respectful game, reactive game. The only one who could play proactively against them was the Czechs. And so I always made a point when I was coaching the national team to get as much video as I could get from the Czechs and the Russians, whether it be league play or international play. I wanted to know what other teams were doing and how they could compete with these guys, because that was our challenge, to step our game up to a level that was difficult to reach.
Thomas, I just wanted to ask Laura a question. Coaching female hockey and Tom, the why. Females tend to want to know why. Guys don't necessarily. Can you just explain that, Laura? growing young guys, I'm sure, coaching young guys, and then young girls. And Dave, this is something that I talk about often, mentoring coaches in Canada, because in their coaching, we're trying to get them to ask more questions and get the players to explain what they're thinking and understand why they're doing things. So, Laura, go ahead, and then I'll go back to Dave.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to the way you were talking about helping people understand, not just the process, but the why behind it. And I think with female hockey, I found that is almost explaining the why almost precedes the actual systems and the this and that, because at every single moment, even asking, or saying this is where we're going to start a drill, automatically the girls look at you. It's why, coach, right? Line up in the corner, why, coach? And so I've almost built it into my coaching strategy to include the whys behind not every point of the drill, but so they have an overall macro understanding of what the point is, what the goal is, but ensuring that at the major points of the drill or the major points of the system, that we're roping that end goal why into each step. And when I played boys hockey when I was young and coached a little bit of boys hockey, and we tried to do a little bit of that as well. And I think that because I was coaching with my dad, and I think it was just because growing up, I always asked why a lot more than my male teammates. But I do find that when you're able to really break those processes down and explain it every step of kind of why we're doing something, it brings that collective understanding and almost helps feed to the buy-in. Everybody knows kind of their role. Everybody kind of knows the goal of whatever it is you're explaining. I don't get anywhere with the females, and it doesn't matter what age or what, whether it's Team Alberta, whether it's, Pee Wee A, if you are from the beginning, starting with why we're doing things, I find that, that kind of collective buy-in seems to become a little bit easier.
Thanks, Laura. Thomas, I don't know that we even asked why coaching the females at the Oval.
I think you were very good at that. And for me, coaching the women's game made me a better coach just because of what Laura was just explaining it, because I learned, first of all, again, going back to Dave, you and George Kingston, you were the first guys that taught me that every drill has to have a teaching point. I'm not just running a drill without any purpose. So there was always one or two teaching points to every single drill. And then, of course, as Laura indicated, women want to have a detailed knowledge about why we are doing certain things, not just on the ice, away from the ice, on the bench, why we are running certain systems or philosophies.
Thomas, go ahead with your thought process and Dave's thinking and what questions you might have.
Dave, I want to go back a little bit to the Russians and the Czechs because you